Welcome, and thank you for joining me. My name is James, and I would like to present a brief presentation on trauma-informed care with a look from an ethnic and cultural sensitive perspective. I'm a social worker by trade, and over the last 4 years, my team and I have been so fortunate enough to work with some licensed marriage and family therapists in clinical supervision settings and really explore and dive deeper into trauma-informed care. I'm going to explain a little bit more what trauma-informed care is from an ethnic and cultural lens perspective, but just wanted to thank you once again for joining me and taking an interest in learning a little bit more about this topic. Let me share my screen. Ethnic, cultural, sensitive, trauma-informed approach. What is ethnic, cultural, sensitive, trauma-informed care? Ethnic, cultural, sensitive, trauma-informed care refers to the capacity for healthcare professionals to effectively provide trauma-informed assessment and intervention that acknowledges, respects, and integrates patients' and families' cultural values, beliefs, and practices. Using a trauma-informed lens is not limited to healthcare professionals. Let me repeat that. Using a trauma-informed lens is not limited to healthcare professionals. We can all benefit from this approach. Why? Why is it important to look at trauma through the lenses of ethnicity and culture? Ethnicity, culture, gender, sexual orientation, and disability are potential sources of resilience, but they also may lead to chronic stressors such as social stigma, discrimination, and oppression, which can increase psychological trauma and PTSD. And that's what we're going to get into in a little bit more greater detail is what does that mean? The psychological trauma and PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, that some groups may experience as a result of their their culture. And I'm going to use lots of examples from the Black community, African American community, because I can speak to different things that have always troubled me in some sense as I've been growing up. And, as a psychology major, doing my studies in the mid to late 90s, wasn't really lots of theories that spoke to some of the stressors, the traumas that I had experienced on a day-to-day basis. And, we can go back to African Americans coming to this country as slaves, and the violence, the torture, and all of the things that's associated with that time in history. And my great grandmother was born in 1897. Uh, 30, a little bit over 30 years prior to the last of the African enslaved people here in Texas receiving their freedom. So my great grandmother's parents most likely were slaves. But their parents definitely were slaves. So there is a history, there is a trauma that she was raised under during those times. And those things affected her. It affected the way that she would raise my grandmother. Those things affected the way my grandmother raised my father, and then eventually the way my father would raise me. And I can say the same thing for my mother's side of the family as well. Some of the work that's been done recently, and I would say in the last 10 years or so, maybe 15, maybe a little bit longer, it's just really starting to come out a little bit more. Is this the genetics of trauma living and being stored in individuals' bodies over generations. Okay, and some of the research is now saying that trauma could be passed along from individuals for up to 14 generations. Okay, so I just named or was able to speak to 4 generations in my family. So they're saying that there's even 10 more generations that the trauma can be stored in individuals' bodies. And some things that have happened to me throughout my lifetime, but really more recently, as I've begun to dive into history a little bit more of this country, of my culture, is things that I've not directly experienced. And I'll go back to slavery. When I hear those stories and when I understand or get a greater understanding of what happened to my ancestors, there is a feeling within me that boils up. Anger, hurt, pain, disgust, just to name a few, but there is a charge that is within my body. And you can say, like, and I would always question, like, man, I wasn't there, but I feel the pain of my ancestors, and I was not even there. That's the trauma going from one generation to the next generation. So it's very important for us to really have an understanding of how these things in the past affect the way things are today. And if we don't, lots of folks will continue not to heal, live in pain and suffering. And when one person lives in pain and suffering, we all kind of feel that in one way or the other. Okay. So I want to go to the next slide and just talk about work being done in the field of this concentration. Resmaa Menakem is a therapist, licensed social worker, a police trainer, and a consultant who specializes in trauma work, addressing conflict and body-centered healing. His most recent book, In My Grandmother's Hands, Racialized Trauma and the Pathway to Mending Our Hearts and Bodies. Resmaa would go on to say in his book, history matters, and an awareness of it puts our lives into a context. A disdain for history sets us adrift and makes us victims of ignorance and denial. History lives in and through our bodies right now and in every moment. That's from his book, My Grandmother's Hands, Racialized Trauma and the Pathway to Mending Our Hearts and Bodies. I'm going to stop sharing really quick as I transition to the video that I want to share of Resmaa talking about that very thing right there. And then we'll come back and we'll talk a little bit about what he said and his theory on this racialized trauma.
When we talk about traumas, one of the things that we have a tendency to do is start just in the personal, right? We start in the personal realm. What happened to me, right? Or why did, and the reason why I'm acting like this is because this thing happened to me. We start in the personal, and the personal is important. But I also think that it's what I call HIP theory, HIPP. And that is that when somebody's personal traumas are triggered, usually it's not just the person. It is why people who have certain types of personal traumas, you can have one person who has the same personal trauma as you, but you get so overwhelmed by it that it incapacitates you, or it makes you react in ways that are that seem like they're out of proportion to what it is that you're dealing with. And so I've come to the conclusion that many times when people are dealing with traumas, they're dealing with the historical aspects of it. So they're dealing with historical things. There's some research that's coming out now that's starting to say that traumas actually can be transmitted up to 14 generations epigenetically, right, in the body. And what happens is that when that is going on, because trauma over time becomes decontextualized, what happens is is that we don't have a way of explaining these sensations or these vibes or these thoughts or these racings or these behaviors and we can't. There is no current language to describe why this much overwhelm is there, right? And so we figure out ways around it. And this is where I think it dovetails into addiction, is that when you can't explain the sheer grief, horror, and terror of something, you're going to try and find a way around it. Or you internalize it and think that something is defective in you. And so what I think is that there's these historical aspects that we need to attend to. There are these intergenerational aspects that we need to attend to that get transferred down to us, not just by what people say to us in the story of the verbal story, but also in the nervous system story. How does my mama's react? How does my mother's nervous system react to something? And then how is that showing up in my mother's nervous system decontextualized? And then how do I learn that as personality or culture, right? And then there are these persistent institutional things that continue to reinforce it. And then you also have the personal trauma.
Okay. So that was Resmaa talking about HIP, H-I-P-P theory. He mentioned historical, intergenerational, persistent, institutional, and personal pieces. Very powerful stuff there. And, I'm going to share a little bit more a speech. I had an opportunity to be a keynote speaker this year for a Juneteenth celebration. And the topic that we discussed was freedom and fatherhood. And I tried to tell a story about the fight for freedom and fatherhood today, and combine those things from a historical perspective into where it has enabled me to be the type of father that I am today. And certain things along my fatherhood journey outside of me has brought me pain. Whereas I've tried to be the best dad that I can be. I show up to all of my children's events. I'm involved academically, athletically, spiritually, physically, all of these things I show up. But there is this perception that the Black father is the absent father. And when we talk about the things that Resmaa talked about, historical, institutional, those perspectives and how we look at things and how they've shaped individuals, again, we can go back to Juneteenth, June 19th, 1865, and prior to that, and then well after that, and discuss the various struggles, and I'm going to say traumas, that the Black father had experienced during that time, and how those things could cause problems later on in their fatherhood journey as we move from generations to generations, but just how people perceive, despite evidence that would otherwise state how involved the Black father is. So let's take a quick look at this next video, and please take a look at it from the perspective of what Resmaa was talking about. Okay, here we go. This is keynote speaker myself, freedom and fatherhood.
Thank you, Rashawn, for that introduction. Thank you, Voices of Recovery, the African American Community Initiative, and the Juneteenth Committee for giving me this opportunity to share about my fatherhood journey. In the work that I do with fathers, I have a saying: And that saying is, fatherhood is a journey you don't have to do alone. So thank you all for the work that you are doing. You are partnering with fathers and meeting them right where they are at a time when they need you the most on their fatherhood journey. I can tell you like it was yesterday what it was like when I called my mother and told her that I was going to be a father. My mom's back east. I gave her a call and I said, Charisma and I are having a baby. And immediately my mother busted out in laughter and shouted, "What?" It was the type of laughter that came from a place of extreme joy and a bit of relief, because my mother knew how much being a father meant to me. And now that dream was becoming a reality. My mother must have laughed and shouted "what" for the next 15 to 20 minutes, and I couldn't get a word in. I enjoyed every moment of it. I am grateful to have had such a joyful experience in the announcement of both the births of my children. But I know that joy was robbed from so many Black fathers many, many years ago. As we celebrate Juneteenth, I don't want to forget the men that were not allowed to marry because they were considered property. Those same men will be paired with mates by their masters, not of their choosing, in many instances for the sole purpose of producing offspring that could be snatched from them at any moment for any reason. But even under those horrible circumstances, Black men still found a way to shine in a fatherly role, which sometimes meant caring for children that may not have been biologically theirs, or having their children cared for by men not biologically theirs. They knew even then the importance of fatherhood being a journey that could not be done alone. Thankfully, a day would come, June 19th, 1865 to be exact, when the last of the enslaved men, women, and children would receive word of freedom that was granted to them 2 years prior. Thankful indeed, but new challenges would present themselves. That being the effects of Black codes, Jim Crow, the war on drugs, and mass incarceration. Systems built upon system presented obstacle after obstacle after obstacle. And without a choice, the challenge was accepted and in many instances overcome. In 2013, the CDC reported Black fathers are more actively involved in their children's lives regardless of if they live with them or not. And in 2018, a study of non-marital births, mothers reported that Black fathers shared responsibility more frequently and displayed more effective co-parenting than any other ethnic group. The engaged Black father is not the truth the media, music, or cinema wants you to believe. I was listening to a podcast of one of my favorite R&B singers not too long ago, Tank. Tank has been in the music industry for over 30 years, and he shared an example of how if he, as a Black artist, sang the same lyrics to Sam Smith's "Stay With Me," he would not get the same airtime as Smith did. Tank would go on to say, "Our violence isn't the threat. Our love is. Our family separated is fine. It's perfect. The man staying with his family and raising his kids and pouring into his woman, that's the threat." As a father, my love is all that will be seen. My two girls deserve that. And from the very beginning, that is what they received. I only missed one prenatal appointment, although I know I was just a glorified taxi driver for my wife to see the doctor. I took leave from work to spend quality time with my girls, And I even decided not to return to one position after paternity leave was up so that one parent could stay in the home. My girls call me Coach Dad, as I have coached all but one athletic team they have participated on. And during that one season I sat in the stands, it drove me crazy. And I got back on the sidelines the very next opportunity I could. I love dropping them off or picking them up at school and participating in as many of their academic activities as I can, which is most. I've encouraged and taught my girls to have a voice even before they could speak. I have loved, respected, and supported their mother because she deserves it, and our girls deserve to have an example to draw from when they are older. And when I say older, I mean much, much older to have a mate. I root for them and I will protect them all of my days. As I conclude, when it comes to my fatherly engagement, it's not providing anything wrong that I take, it's not proving anyone wrong that I take pride in. I take pride in loving my daughters with all that I am because that's what they deserve. I want to wish all the fathers and father figures out there a very happy Father's Day. I encourage you to keep pushing forward on your journey and reach out for help and give help often. To all, I wish you a happy Juneteenth. Let us pause and reflect on our past so we can learn and mobilize to build a better future for all. Thank you.
Every time I take a look at that video, share it with someone, it's almost as if I'm giving that speech for the first time. I get to the point where I talk about when the freedom was granted to the last enslaved people, but there was a 2-year period before they received that word. It really, it's very emotional to me. And I believe that is what Resmaa is talking about, that trauma that has gone generation to generation, that injustice, in knowing history. It really touches me to know that you were already behind the game and being able to have an equal opportunity, but even more behind the game with that 2 years. And history would tell us that there was still a long ways to go before the Black father could be able to live into all of what they had envisioned and what anyone envisions in regards to being a father on their fatherhood journey. I hope you gathered some of the things of the institutional things. Lots of laws passed in this country that I did not live through. But again, from generation to generation, the effects that has. So I hope that speech paired with Resmaa's theory of HIP can give really the same perspective, but from very different type of the same perspective, the same message, but from different vantage points, I would say. Resmaa is more clinical, and I am definitely less clinical in that regard, but still speaking the same thing. Let me share my screen again. So that was Fatherhood and Freedom. We talked about the challenges faced by Black fathers not allowed to marry, seen as breeders only. Their children could be taken away from them. Black codes, Jim Crow, the war on drugs, and mass incarceration, all having effects on how fathers are on their journey at a present or specific time, but definitely the trauma from those instances carrying on into later generations. I'd like to share this with you as well. Warmth of Other Sons by Martin Luther McCoy, who is a vocalist. And he wrote this song, and I just want to share what he wrote in regards to this song. I wrote the warmth of other suns as soon as I heard the phrase mentioned. I was enamored by the collection of words because of the possibility I read into them. It is possible to be warmed by a foreign sun, metaphorically, but you will never know unless you pick up, and travel there. This could be a mental journey or one that is physical, as the book itself describes the journey three unrelated African American families went through to escape the tortures of the Jim Crow South. We as a nation are still suffering under the policies and bureaucratic norms that exclude, target, and antagonize people of color for no other reason than not being born white. For some, these issues are too much to have to face squarely on, and we cannot wait anymore. Art as a weapon of change is not new, and I'm just adding my pixel of color to the palette, excuse me. Martin Luther McCoy. I want to share his song. It's a beautiful song, and it just, again, from a different medium, speaks to the things that Resmaa spoke about, and about the things that I spoke about.
We are aware of your fear and exhausted from having to hide who we are. Pretending that we're less won't make you stronger in the end. We suffer from black pain for white gain, crack laws versus cocaine. You don't consider all the horror that we've been through till we force a new horizon to come in view. Funny how you fashion yourself the hero, deconstruction of the Negro. Oh, maybe we'll find our light in the warmth of other suns, the warmth of other suns, the warmth of other suns. Maybe we'll reach our height in the warmth of other suns, in the warmth of other suns, in the warmth of other suns. I know you're willing to rid the world of all who would oppose you. Digital mind control that tolls the soul by trolling each and every part of me. I just want to be free. We suffer from black pain for white gain, crack laws versus cocaine. You don't consider it too cruel or unjust when it's done to us. Funny how you fashion yourself the hero, deconstruction of the Negro. Whoa, maybe we'll find our light in the warmth of other suns, in the warmth of other suns, in the warmth of other suns. No, maybe we'll reach our height in the warmth of other suns, in the warmth of other suns, in the warmth of other suns. Maybe we'll find our light in the warmth of other suns, in the warmth of other suns, in the warmth of other suns. No, maybe we'll reach our height in the warmth of other suns, in the warmth of other suns, in the warmth of other suns. Now how we gon' eat? Oh, just looking for heat. Oh, oh, in another, oh, in another, oh, oh, we can't lose another one. No, not another son. Oh, no, not another one.
So how do we heal? We heal by understanding that the process will differ from ethnic group to another ethnic group. But regardless of the difference, we all need to heal our racialized trauma. I just gave you 3 examples of a mental health professional, a social worker, a community activist, if you would like to say, or if I'd like to say, and a person that is a musician, an artist. And the message was resoundingly the same in all 3 instances of their expressions. And to me, I think that's what the warmth of other suns is having these different individuals from different places speak the same truth, and hoping that someone will listen, because we are going to continue to speak the truth because that's part of our healing process. And we've got a lot of healing to do, and we can all participate in that act of helping those that have been traumatized to heal. So thank you very much for your attention, for your interest in this topic. Please, if I could be of any further assistance in the information that you just received, I would love to. So just please reach out in any way, shape, or form, and I'll definitely be there and a willing participant to help you, help me in helping others. So thank you, and have a good one. Bye.